Our goal in this video is to define a series of measures with DAX that allow us to analyze the indicators stored in these tables separately from each other. We imported two indicators into our dataset: population and GDP. We want to define a separate measure for each one so we can plot them separately in our report. First, let's create a basic measure that sums the indicator value column. On our indicators table, we will call it sum indicator value, all one word, equals, open up a sum operator, and I'm going to sum the indicator value column as seen here. Close parentheses, and then commit that formula. I'm going to use the Home table drop-down here to move that to our Measures table. We won't actually visually plot it anywhere in the report because this measure is currently summing all of the data from that indicator value column. Let's go to the model view for a moment and let's make our sum indicator value measure invisible in our model by clicking this eyeball button next to its name. This is to ensure that we don't accidentally plot this measure to our report anywhere. Now, let's go back to Report View and start defining each of the downstream measures. I'm going to select the Measures table and click New Measure to define each one. Here I have already created these measures, but I am going to go over them again, so you get an idea of what to do. The series code for population is sp.poptotl. So, I'm going to create a measure called population equals, calculate, and we're going to reference our sum indicator value measure, comma, and now we're going to reference our series code column, and say series code equals sp.poptotl, close parenthesis, and commit our measure. Then let's go to our measure tools, which we can get to on the data view, select our population measure, go to measure tools, and make sure that this is formatted as a whole number with commas. Then, let's make our GDP measure by again going to our measures table, clicking New Measure. The series code for gross domestic product is newyork.gdp.mktp.kd. So, we're going to create our new measure as GDP equals, calculate. Once again, we're going to reference that sum indicator value measure that we created earlier, add a comma, reference the series code column again, and then we're going to say, equals newyork.gdp.mktp.kd, close parenthesis, and commit this value. Then, let's make sure that this particular measure is formatted as a currency measure, and let's tell it to use 0 decimal places, like so. Next, we're going to calculate GDP per capita, which is commonly used to measure economic prosperity. We will say GDP per capita equals, divide, GDP measure, comma, population measure, comma, 0. We will then commit that, and we will make sure that this measure is again formatted as currency. And we will round it off to 0 decimal places. Next, let's add a few more measures that will calculate some indicators for the year 2020. First measure, we will call this 2020 GDP. We're going to say this equals calculate GDP, comma, where the year from the indicators table is equal to 2020, close parenthesis, and commit. Then we will define another measure called 2020 population, which is equal to calculate population measure, comma, indicators year is equal to 2020, close parenthesis. And finally, we will define the 2020 GDP per capita, 2020 GDP per capita, which is equal to calculate GDP per capita, where the indicators year is equal to 2020. Now, 2020 GDP and 2020 GDP per capita both need to be currency measures, rounded to 0 decimal places. The 2020 population will need to be a whole number, and we'll add some comma separators between our thousands, okay? The final measure that we'll add in this video is population density, and we'll call this 2020 pop density. Start with a square bracket. And then start typing in the name of the measure. You'll get 2020 population, then comma, and then add divide at the start of the formula, and for the denominator of our divide operation here we will say sum of the land area column, like so, close parenthesis to close out our sum function, and then comma, 0 for our alternate result, then close parenthesis, and commit. And let's display for this one just one decimal place. And there's one more measure that we'll want to add to our model, but we're gonna spread that out over the next couple of videos, so I can teach you some DAX techniques that I think you should know. Go to the model view and take a look at the measures we just created.